This is John McQuay with 8541 Tactical. And this is Mail Call Mondays, the show that answers your questions about precision rifles, optics, and equipment. Well, as you can see by the stuff laid out before me today, this is the long-awaited cleaning episode. We're going to go over what you need to do to clean a precision rifle. You guys have been asking for this time and time again, so I figured we'd put the regular format on pause for this week and actually go over cleaning this thing. Before we get into it, I want to make sure that I say there are as many ways to clean a rifle as there are products out there. The way I'm going to show you is a way to clean it. It's not necessarily the way. If you have a way that Pappy taught you that works better and you've been using for years and years and years, keep using it. Don't let anything I say here mean that the way you've been doing it is wrong. There are tons of different ways to clean them. This is just the way that I've found that I like to clean my rifles. It gets me good results and it gets me consistent results on the target. We are not worried about cleaning it to surgical clean. We're worried about functional clean. Nobody's going to come in and white glove inspect my rifles. So as long as we're protecting them from corrosion and we're keeping a large amount of fouling out of them, that's the whole intent here. Now we grabbed our Remington 700 rifle. This one does not get used a whole lot anymore since I've got the AI and several other rifles. So I figured it's a good time for us to really scrub this thing down and get it set up so that it's going to be preserved and safe, and I'm not going to have to worry about surface rust or any of that nonsense. Whenever you start to clean a precision rifle, first and foremost is safety. We need to make sure that the rifle is unloaded. Pull the bolt back. You want to make sure that there are no rounds in the magazine. You want to physically and visually check. Make sure there are no rounds in the follower and into the chamber. Take your little pinky finger, jam your pinky finger up there into the chamber and make sure that it's clear. Next thing we want to do is reach underneath in the trigger guard and press up on the bolt release and pull the bolt to the rear and remove it. We're just going to go ahead and set the bolt aside right now, and we'll get to it here later. The next thing you want to do is drop the magazine floor plate, and you'll see this little button in the front edge of the trigger guard. That's the magazine floor plate release. You push forward on it and the magazine floor plate will spring down. Pinch the spring and the floor plate with your thumb and finger and swing it down, and that'll bring the follower and the floor plate down. You can just let it hang like that. It's not going to hurt anything. It's out of the way. That way anything that drops out through the loading port will just fall out the bottom of the rifle. You don't have to worry about patches getting jammed in somewhere. Now, as you'll see on this rifle, we've got a Eagle stock pack on here. It's got this wonderful, they call it lamy suede material. I don't want to get any bore solvent or any oil in the cheek piece of this rifle, so we're going to go ahead and take it off. And we're going to set that aside as well. Now we've got the rifle prepared for cleaning now. One thing we want to do is put the rifle in a condition where the muzzle is lower than the action. For this, I'm just going to use an empty bullet box. Again, this is empty. When we're doing this, we don't want any ammunition anywhere around the rifle. Safety first. We're going to take the empty bullet box and we're going to put it underneath the toe of the stock. Now, as you can see, the barrel is pointed slightly downwards. When we get in here and we start putting solvents through the barrel, that solvent will tend to get into all the cracks and crevices. If you've got it in a condition where the muzzle is higher than the receiver, that solvent will have a tendency to run back and get down into the action. Now, this rifle is not bedded, it just has a aluminum bedding block, but if you have a rifle that is glass bedded, if that solvent gets in around the glass bedding, it has the ability to soften up the glass bedding and possibly damage the bedding job in the rifle. We also have a lot of fine parts back here in the trigger assembly, and we don't want the solvent and gunk that we're cleaning out of the barrel to get down into the trigger assembly. That can cause you some problems later on. So in addition to tilting the barrel forward, you want to get a bore guide. Now this is a Lucas bore guide. We'll put the information on how you can get one down in the comments section. The nice features on it, first of all, is it's tapered down here to fit into the chamber. It's got an O-ring on it to seal the chamber so that solvent can't run around the end of the bore guide and come back. It has a little port here for patches or solvent. You'll see I don't really use the port, but it's nice to have it if you want. The nice part about it is this secondary piece here. This fits tight around your rod. Fitting tight around your cleaning rod keeps it from wiggling around in there. It keeps the cleaning rod from bowing. This slides into there and actually gives you a couple of points of support for your cleaning rod as it goes into the chamber. Now, why that is important is because right up here at the tip of the chamber, you have the portion where it goes from what the chamber reamer has cut into your rifling. That's called the throat. That's a very critical portion because it's the first portion where the bullet engages the rifling. We want to protect the throat of that rifle. When you hear about a barrel being shot out or burned out, usually what you're talking about is a barrel that's had the throat destroyed by erosion from firing, but you can also destroy it by cleaning if you're cleaning improperly. So the chamber guide helps center the bore rod when it goes through here to prevent the rod from impacting the rifling. So we take our rod guide, slide it in, and push it forward until we know it's seated in there. And this one's dry, haven't used it in a little while. So sometimes if you're having some trouble getting it to seat, maybe a good idea just to put a drop of oil on that O-ring to soften it back up. We're using Militech 1 for our oil, but CLP works well. Rem oil is okay. There are a bunch of different oils out there. It's not really, you see that slid right in there, pretty easy this time. It doesn't really matter what oil that you're using, as long as it does the job of keeping the part sliding smoothly and preventing corrosion. Now we've got our bore guide in there. The next thing we're going to talk about is our rod. Now the rod I've got here is a Dewey rod. It's nylon coated. The important thing about this rod, first of all, is it's longer than the barrel with the bore guide inserted. That's one of the key things you got to keep in mind. You want it longer than the barrel with the bore guide inserted. Then secondly, you want to make sure that you're not putting anything that's steel or segmented in there. The coating on this rod is softer than the material that's inside the bore of the rifle. It's softer than the rifling. So if something has to give, the wear is going to be on the coating of the rod. This rod is a whole lot cheaper than the barrel on the rifle. So after a while, if this coating starts to get worn away and torn up, chuck the rod, buy a new rod. The next thing you want to look at is this rod is actually for 27 to 30 caliber rifles. It's very thick. It's a whole lot thicker than a rod that you'll find in a universal cleaning kit. Thicker rods do not bend anywhere near as easily. That means when I'm shoving this through the bore, it's going to stay true and it's going to be supported by the patch on one end and the bore guide on the other end. This will prevent the center of the rod from touching the side of the barrel. You don't want that rod to get in there and to bow and to start rubbing on the side of the rifling inside the bore. Now the Dewey rods, they're kind of strange because they have a non-typical thread on them. They have this heavy male thread, whereas most of your cleaning rods are going to have a pretty small female thread on them. I like the heavy male thread because it gives you a little bit better support if for some reason you've got a really tight bore, you're having trouble getting a rod through, or you have to clear a bore obstruction, then they're less likely to bend and cause the tip to break. Now you notice the jag that we're using here, this is called a Parker Hale Jag, and we wrap the patch around the jag instead of sticking the jag through it. I like the Parker Hales just because I think it gives me a little bit more surface area pushing against the bore. And when you wrap the patch, I feel it gives you a more uniform coverage than when you just jam a patch holder through. I really don't like the eyelet style patch holders. The eyelet style leaves you exposed brass on the sides, and I would really rather have the entire jag covered by a patch. So that's enough on the rod. On bore brushes, I have a Dewey no harm nylon bore brush here. All it is nylon bristles wrapped around a bronze center. I just like nylon because I think it lasts a little bit longer. It doesn't have a tendency to get bent and lay back. Also, obviously, nylon is a lot softer than barrel steel, so you don't really have to worry about the barrel getting tore up by your brush. These are disposable. Buy several of them. When they start to get worn out or looking grungy, toss them. Don't try to stretch extended life out of them. They're so cheap that they're really not worth risking anything. Now you'll notice that this brush has got this little fine threaded tip, and our Dewey rod has the thick threaded tip. Well, Dewey provides this little adapter that screws on the back of our nylon brush to allow it to screw on the end of the Dewey rod. That's a good thing to hang on to. Don't get it lost. Now, the first thing I like to do when I start cleaning the rifle is get the bore coated in solvent and allow the solvent to do the action. The common theme throughout the entire cleaning here is we're going to allow the chemicals to do the work. We're not going to get in there with our elbow grease and scrub away. We're just going to lay down chemicals, let them do the work, and then remove the chemicals along with the fouling later. So to start that off, I've got some Hops number 9 here. I put it in these neat little needle bottles from Brownells. It allows me to get it on the brush really easily. The next thing, you'll notice I've got a 20-ounce soda bottle here. It's just a standard 20-ounce bottle. And this will fit very nicely over the muzzle of your rifle. We'll pull the rifle back a little bit here so that it's in frame and you can see. You just take the 20-ounce bottle and it fits over very nicely. If it's a new 20-ounce bottle that hasn't been modified or anything, on the Remington, the 26-inch Remingtons, it'll squeeze over and it'll be pretty snug. This bottle, you know, is really loose. It slides back quite a bit because I use it on several different barrels. So what I did is I took a pair of Tim snips or a pair of heavy-duty scissors and I just cut a line down the side of the opening of the bottle. That will allow it to go over the break on my AR-10. It'll also slide a little bit easier over this barrel, and it'll go on the shorter 20-inch Remington 700s very easily. Now the purpose for this is when you run this bore brush down through the barrel, when it comes out the muzzle end, those bristles are going to fan out. And if you've ever run your thumb over the end of a wet toothbrush, you know it flicks that water everywhere. Well, when this comes out of the end of the bore, it's going to be covered with carbon and solvent. If you're doing this at your kitchen table, your significant other is going to be very upset when they find carbon all over the drapes, all over the walls, all over the table. It goes everywhere. So this little beauty here will catch that spray that comes off of the end of the brush when it exits the muzzle. So once you've got your bottle on there, we'll move the rifle forward here and set it back in our muzzle down position. We're going to remove our Parker Hale Jag, set it aside, and put our bore brush on. Again, you want to make sure that the brush is actually going to exit the bore when you push it through. Now, we do have a little miscalculation on this one. When I originally bought this rod, I didn't have the Lucas bore guide. So for what I'm doing here, I'm pulling the little rear piece out. For those folks of you at home that are doing this, when you order the Dewey rod, make sure you take into account what the length of your bore guide is. When you're ordering any rod, make sure you take into account what the length of your bore guide is so you don't run into this issue. This 26-inch Remington is the only one that I have this problem with, mainly because it's the only rifle I have that has a 26-inch barrel. Everything else is shorter and will work with the will work with this Dewey rod. Subsequently, the next Dewey rod that I ordered was the longer version, because these don't go a whole lot of places with me. It fits in the Pelican case just fine, and that's really the only thing I worried about. they don't need to be compact because I don't pack these to the field. I have other solutions for rods in the field. Now what we're going to do is take our brush here, and we're going to take our little needle bottle with our solvent, and we're just simply going to drop solvent on our brush. I'll change my hand position here for a little bit extra control. And I like to just run the needle tip all the way down the flutes of the brush. And that gets me a good deal of solvent coated on the brush. I just want to get it nice and shiny there. We're not trying to get the solvent dripping off. Once I've got that, I'm going to insert it through the bore guide and get it started in the rifling. And then we're just going to run it all the way through. Now here's the key point. You want to run it all the way through until that brush exits the muzzle. Come back here, and we're going to show you. When I remove the bottle, you'll notice that the brush has come all the way out of the muzzle. There are no parts of the brush that are still touching the muzzle. And this is important because what we're going to do here in a minute is we're going to pull this brush back through. Now I know that'll make a whole lot of you cringe. That's the way I do it. I'll do one shot down, one shot back for 5 repetitions. Now, a lot of guys say, no, you shouldn't do that because when you pull the brush back through, it can harm the crown. I've never seen any damage from the crown doing this. Again, I use a nylon brush, and we're going very gently when we do this. So when you pull it back through very gently, you'll have the bristles center the brush on the crown when it comes back through. So you should be getting even distribution, and you should get the brush come back through. Now you can, of course, when you get to this point, unscrew the brush if you wish and pull the bare rod back through. That way you're only sending the brush one direction each time. I like to get through the cleaning as quickly as possible. I don't think it is really necessary, but if it makes you feel more comfortable, you can do that. It's appropriate. A lot of guys do unscrew the brush before you pull the rod out. One of the reasons I don't like doing that is because now you have an unprotected threaded rod end coming back through your barrel. I'd much rather have the nice soft nylon brush touching it than the possibility of a threaded end or a sharp shoulder on a cleaning rod going back through the bore. That's just me. Do it however you like to do it. And if you could see on this, it's kind of hard with the cameras that we're using, but just that one shot through, there's all kinds of carbon flecked on the inside of the neck of this bottle, so it caught a lot of the stuff that came out. We're going to put that back on. Set our rifle back up here. Now, we're going to pull our brush back through and make sure that rod's tightened a little bit. Now the important thing on these rods is as you're pushing this through, don't hold on to the rod itself, hold on to the handle. On Dewey rods, they have a ball bearing here in the handle. So the rod will rotate with the rifling in the bore and the handle will stay stationary. So we're going to do this 5 times here. That was number 2. 3, 4, 5. Now we're going to bring this out, and here's the important part. We're going to take our rag and we're going to wipe down the rod. We're going to take all that grit and all that fouling and take it off the rod. Now we're going to remove the bore brush, and we are done with the bore brush. It's that easy. The only thing we're using the bore brush for is to distribute the solvent in there and get it kind of mixed in with any fouling. Now if you're really anal about your bore brushes and you want them to last for a while, take this out and spray it with some brake cleaner to get the solvent off. The solvent attacks copper. There's copper in the bronze that's in the brush. It also has the ability to brittle the nylon and cause all kind of other damage depending on what kind of solvents you're using. So if you want them to last a long time, spray them with brake cleaner. It also knocks some of that carbon out, gets them kind of cleaned down. I'll do it every now and again. I'll probably hit this one a little bit later because it's starting to look just a little grungy after that pass. So we'll set that aside. Now comes the waiting time. We're just going to basically sit and wait probably about 10 or 15 minutes for that solvent to work into the carbon and work into that copper, and then we'll come back and we'll follow it with some wet patches. Okay, we're back, and it's about 10 minutes later by my watch. We're going to kind of accelerate this because we need to get things rolling here. We've let our solvent work in. Hopefully it's knocked that carbon loose a little bit and started to work on the copper. So now we're going to switch over to patches. Now I like to use these square cotton patches because they fit around my Jag really nice. Now the thing you want to keep in mind is take a look at which direction the Jag screws on here, and remember which direction your rifling is. You've got right-hand rifling. That's generally the reason that these Jags screw on the way they do, so that you don't want the Jag unscrew into the barrel. I want to wrap the patch around the Jag and turn the rod in the direction that it screws into the Jag to tighten. This pulls the patch nice and snug. Pulls the patch nice and snug around the Jag. Now because of the little teeth on the Parker Hale Jag, now it sticks on there, and I've got this nice tight little patch roll. I'll take my little needle oiler here, and I'm going to go ahead and saturate this patch with some hops number 9 and let it soak in. As we really want to try to get just about every part of this patch that's going to touch the bore covered with some of the solvent. We're basically wet mopping the bore and just keep things wet in there and knock an initial chunk of that out. Now at this point, because I've forgotten to do this, we're going to slide the adapter back on here for our Lucas bore guide. And that will help seal it inside the bore guide. So we're going to start our patch in the bore guide, and I like to turn it as I'm putting it in to keep that patch tightly wrapped. And I especially like to turn it as I'm engaging the throat. That keeps the patch tightened around the end of that Jag. You don't have to worry about it uncoiling, because if it uncoils a little bit and gets thick in there, it's going to be really difficult to push through. I'll slide the adapter up in there so that now our rod is very tightly fit inside the bore guide. I'm going to go ahead and run this through, and I will run it through until I just start to see the tip of the Jag protruding from the muzzle of the rifle. Bring this back here, and you can see that it's about halfway out there. I don't want to push it all the way through, because then the patch will uncoil and I'll pull a bare Jag back through the barrel. So I push it through until it just gets to this point here. You don't have to worry about pushing it all the way through like you do with the brush, because you're not worried about the bristles changing directions. There's going to be the same amount of pressure no matter if it comes halfway out or all the way out. We just don't want it to come all the way out so that the patch falls off of it. And as you can see, it's pretty nasty that it's come out of there. It's really covered with a bunch of carbon and nastiness, so it's doing its job. Now, we're just going to pull it back out. And you can see our patch here is a combination. At the tip here, the front half, it's really kind of gray and black. And at the back half here, we can see the green-blue starting. That's from the copper soaking into the patch. Now we'll go ahead and pull this patch off. Set it aside. Grab our cleaning rag here. And again, we're going to make sure we wipe our rod down. Now we're going to sit down. And I usually wait about 5 minutes for this patch. and I will run between 3 to 5 wet patches through, and that's really all you need. So 3 to 5 wet patches, and depending on how the condition looks when they're coming out, we'll decide if I want to keep running them or not. I'm not so much looking for the blue-green from the copper. I'm looking for the black from the carbon. You have to be careful with the blue-green, because if you keep running patches, since we're using a bronze Jag, if you keep running patches through, you're still going to get just a tiny bit of blue-green because of the copper in the Jag. So don't feel that you have to get all of the blue-green out. Concentrate mainly on getting this copper out. So 3 to 5 patches. Don't go more than 5 patches, because then if you're getting a little bit of gray, barrel steel will look gray when it comes out on a patch. So going more than that, you're starting to get into some added wear that you don't need to be doing. So 3 to 5 wet patches, and then we're going to come back and see where we're at. I'm not going to make you watch as I run 3 to 5 wet patches through. It's just not necessary. So we'll come back here in a minute and see what we've got for the next step. Now, after we've run our 3 to 5 wet patches through the bore, waiting 5 minutes between each patch for the solvents to do their job, it's time to run some dry patches through to get all that garbage out. Now, you don't have to wait between each dry patch. Just go ahead and fire them through. And I'll run 3 to 5 dry patches, looking at the patches as they come out to let them tell me how we need to proceed. Now, for our demonstration here, I went ahead and ran 5 dry patches. But if you look at the condition of the patches as they came out, as I've got them laid out here, you'll notice that there really wasn't an improvement after patch number 3 to patch number 5. Looking at patch number 3, that's generally where I would have stopped. It doesn't make a difference to go on any deeper than that. Now, if you were putting this rifle away for quite a long time, months on end, then it might be a good idea to go ahead and just throw an oil soak patch down the barrel to leave a little bit of corrosion protection in there when you store the rifle. I never really have worried about the corrosion protection since they're in a climate controlled safe. So I'll leave the bore dry. That way I have less deviation on the first round that comes out of the barrel, and I don't have to remember to punch a patch through it before I take it out shooting. You never want to shoot a wet barrel. If you leave a lot of oil and junk in there, it's fouling. It can increase the pressure of that first round, and it can actually cause damage to the barrel because those solvents don't want to compress when the bullet comes through. So dry barrel, when you're firing, if you're going to leave it for a long period of time and it makes you feel better, throw a wet patch down there, a wet oiled patch. You don't want to leave any solvent in the barrel, but throw a wet oil patch in there. Now, a real quick note on solvents. I like hops number 9 because it's not a very aggressive solvent. It's not going to kill your barrel if you leave it in a little bit longer. Be very careful of some of the really aggressive solvents, sweets, or some of the other ones that if you leave them in the bore for any amount of time, you do any kind of bore soaking, they can actually start to tear up the barrel steel. They'll actually start to pitch your barrel. So I don't like to soak the bores on a regular cleaning. I don't think it's really necessary. I think the process that I showed here with the nylon brush and the patches will do good for your regular cleaning. Now, cleaning intervals, I only scrub the bore like this about every 500 to 600 rounds on a .308 rifle. That gets me the best compromise between cleaning and longevity and accuracy. I don't find a need to clean every range trip because then you just have to end up fouling out the rifle on the next range trip before you can get down to business. The first few shots out of the bore are not going to be your most accurate. Whereas if you leave the rifle fouled, then it'll be good to go. Again, this sits in a climate-controlled safe when I'm not actually shooting it. So leaving it fouled is not a big deal between shootings. This rifle, when I was using it for work, was riding in the back of a police car, fouled. And police cars are not the most climate-controlled environments. They're generally damp because most of them leak. And I never had a problem with corrosion on the rifle, especially in the bore. So it's really not a big deal to leave it fouled between shootings. But if it makes you feel better, clean it before you put it up. A lot of what we do in cleaning, or a lot of what some guys do in cleaning, is more to make them feel better than to actually have an impact on what's going on with the rifle. Now, since we've got the bore cleaned, the next step is to clean any garbage out that we left in the chamber. So we're going to go ahead and pull our bore guide out. Sometimes they stick in there pretty well. Go ahead and wipe your bore guide off, because remember we put some oil on that O-ring and we don't want it to pick up any garbage for a while. And we'll stick our bore guide in our little cleaning box here. To get some of the residual stuff out of the chamber that may have leaked around the bore guide, I'll just take a patch and take my cleaning rod, and I'm basically going to skewer the patch with the cleaning rod, run it in there. I'm not actually trying to push it through the bore. I'm just turning it in the neck and shoulder area of the chamber. And skewering it like that with the Parker Hale Jag, it won't allow it to actually push through, so I can just use a little bit of tension and turn it. And I'm turning it clockwise so that I'm not unscrewing the Jag. I'll just back it out here. And we really have hardly anything on that patch at all, because remember, this is a bolt action rifle. This isn't a semi-auto, so you don't have a lot of gases coming back into the chamber. They're generally isolated there at the neck, and depending on what you're shooting and how you're sizing your rounds will depend on what kind of neck sealing you're getting. We're done with the barrel at this point. Well, we have one more step on the barrel. We're going to bring it back, and the final thing we're going to do on the barrel after we remove our catch bottle there is we're just going to wipe off the crown. We will get some solvent dripping out of the end of the bore, and we want to wipe off any carbon fouling off of the crown. Usually when you're shooting it, you'll have a star pattern of fouling on the actual muzzle, so we're just going to wipe that off. This rifle's been painted with Krylon, and Krylon does not like bore solvent, so we want to try not to get the solvent back on the bore or on the stock here, because it will eat the Krylon off. It'll make it soft and then it'll just wipe off. So the crown, or the muzzle, will generally not have any paint on it from just the solvent eating it off. But we want to make sure that the carbon fouling is cleaned off of that. Now, I'll have a lot of guys say that they've cleaned the rifle and they've looked through the muzzle and they've seen carbon fouling in there, or copper fouling in the muzzle, or whatever. Don't worry about it. If you have, these factory barrels are fairly rough. If you have a tiny bit of fouling left in it and a few little streaks of copper, it's not a big deal. It's not the end of the world. It's not going to harm your rifle in any way, shape, or form. And it's not going to harm your accuracy. Assuming that you don't have just gobs and gobs of copper buildup, a couple of streaks is not going to be that big of a deal. You're going to do more harm every time you clean this rifle trying to get that last little bit out than you are just leaving it there. So unless you see an accuracy problem, don't try to scrub the rifling out of the barrel. Now that we've got the barrel done, we're just going to take a rag and go ahead and wipe out the inside of the receiver. You're going to wipe out the lug raceways, which are the indents that you feel on either side of the receiver. Get those wiped out. If you have trouble getting in there with your fingers, then take a light rag, take an old used toothbrush, drape the rag over the toothbrush and run it in there, and use the bristles to push the rag into the raceways. This rifle has been kept fairly clean, so there's not really a bunch of junk in the raceways of it. That's all for wiping out the receiver. Now we're going to go ahead and tear the bolt down. And we just recently, on the last Mail Call Mondays, covered how to disassemble the bolt. So we're going to swing around here real quick and use my fantastic bolt disassembly tool and get our bolt, get our dime placed back in the firing pin, or in the cocking piece on our firing pin assembly, and then unscrew it. Now all you have to do on the firing pin assembly is just simply wipe it down. Make sure you don't have big chunks of grease or garbage on the spring. And we want to leave the end of the firing pin dry. I don't like to put oil on the end of the firing pin because it seems to attract grit and dirt. And that's the part that is exposed through the firing pin hole. Also, primers can be deactivated by oil. So I really don't want to put a lot of oil or a lot of garbage in here, because if you're carrying it with the muzzle down, which is the common method, then there's the possibility that oil is going to seep out of that firing pin hole and surround that primer. And while most modern ammunition is fairly well sealed against that kind of stuff, there is still the possibility of that primer becoming deadened from the oil. So I like to just use very light oil on the firing pin spring and just on the body of the firing pin. I don't put anything up towards the tip of the firing pin. Now these threads down here, you want to make sure that they're clean and free of debris, because they actually help contribute to how the bolt feel on the rifle is when you lift the bolt handle. So if they're all nasty and really garbaged up, then your bolt lift is going to be kind of gritty and possibly tight. Now we're going to pick up the bolt body and wipe the bolt body down, and we're just going to wipe off the back of the lugs, and we're going to inspect the back of the lugs to make sure that they're smooth and there's no galling. We don't want to see any chunks of metal or any deep scratches in there. This is the actual working surface that locks the bolt into the receiver before you fire the rifle, and this is what takes all the impact of that round firing. So we want to make sure that that's nice and clean. You'll see on a lot of factory Remingtons that there will be considerably more wear on one lug than on the other lug. That's just one of the things that you get with a factory rifle. One lug is seating harder than the other lug. When the rifle is trued, generally a gunsmith will clean those up so that both will have the same tension on them when the rifle is locked in. We're going to check the bottom of the bolt and check the lugs where they ride in the raceway. Make sure that we don't have any nicks or deep scratches on there, because that helps the feeling of the bolt riding smoothly. The outer edges of the bolt lugs don't have a whole lot to do with anything. You want to make sure that your anti-bind notch here is clear of any debris, and just generally that the bolt is clean and well maintained. Back here on the handle, you'll generally see a little spot on the angle where the finish is worn away. This is your extraction cam. When you lift that bolt, it works against the angle on the back of the receiver here to help pull the cartridge out of the chamber. On some Remingtons, that won't ever actually engage. They're just a little bit out of spec. I've seen some where the extraction angle never actually touches. Again, it's going to depend. That's factory variance. For cleaning, you want to come up here and make sure you take your rag and wipe the bolt face out real well. You got a toothbrush, get in there with your toothbrush and knock any debris, any carbon out, wipe off the brass. Check for any brass shavings in there. You want to make sure that the ejector moves freely up and down. Now we come to the extractor in here. Don't touch the extractor. It does not need to be removed for cleaning. It's a one-shot deal. Once you take the extractor out, that extractor is trash. You need to throw it away and put a new extractor in. All it is a little spring, a little piece of spring metal in there that grabs the edge of the cartridge body when you extract it. If you take it out, when you take it out, it gets bent and then it will never go back in there right. It may work well for a couple of rounds, but then you're going to start having extraction problems and you're going to need to replace it. So leave it alone. Just clean it, make sure there's no corrosion on it. If you see big balls of rust on it or something, then you're going to need to chuck it and put a new one in there. The factory Remington extractors work quite well when they're not monkeyed with. If they are out of adjustment, or if it's slid around in the bolt head, or it wasn't installed correctly at the factory, then you'll have problems with it. And in that case, check our other video on the extractor replacement. It's a very simple process, very quick, and they're very cheap. I keep a couple laying around so that I can replace them at the first sign of trouble. Generally, you won't have any trouble with them though. I've got rifles that have gone thousands and thousands and thousands of rounds without any problems from the extractors. That's about it. If you haven't given it any love in a long time, you can take some brake cleaner and spray out the bolt body and get any crud out of there. You really don't want to go sticking anything in there. If you go jamming things in there, there's a chance you're going to get debris stuck in there, and it's going to cause you problems. So just give it a good wipe down, give it some love with a dry toothbrush. You don't want to lube the bolt face. You want to leave that dry, again, for the whole primer issue. So that's all we need to do on the bolt body. When we go to reassemble it, we're going to take a little bit of Militech, and I'm going to drop it on my finger here as it drips off onto my nice table. And I'm just going to run it over the spring. I said I'm mainly concerned with the spring. We're going to put a little bit of grease on the bolt body, or on the threads on the firing pin assembly here. Pick up our bolt body, and we're going to thread it back in. Now on the front, or I'm sorry, on the bottom of the bolt body, you'll see this angle cut out here. That's actually the cocking cam. That's the part of the bolt body that pulls the firing pin cocking piece back when you lift the bolt handle. What I'll do is I'll take this grease and I'll put just a tiny dab right in the V of that notch. That way the first time that you pull the trigger and drop it and then lift the bolt handle, the cocking piece will redistribute the lube in that notch. I'll then also come on the back side of the bolt, and I'll just put a drop of grease on the back of each of the bolt lugs. Okay, now that we've taken our dime out on our high-speed disassembly reassembly tool, I'm just going to take a drop of Militech on the bolt body, and with my fingers I'm just going to distribute that around the bolt body. You can see this bolt body has been running for a while. A lot of the finish is worn off in places on it. It gives a very smooth feel after you've worn some of that factory finish off. The factory finish tends to be pretty rough on these. However, since you now have some bare metal exposed in places, it's important to keep a light coat of lube on it. And as you see here, it's not very much. I'm just putting a drop on and then redistributing it with my fingers all over the outer edge of the bolt lugs and on the body itself. And that's enough to keep corrosion at bay. You don't want to put a heavy coat of grease or oil on it, because not only does this section of the bolt ride against your ammunition that's in the magazine, but it's also exposed to the elements, so you get dirt and dust that's blowing about. The more lube that you put on it, the more is going to collect dust and dirt and pull it into the action when you cycle the bolt. So just a really light coating will take care of it. Now to reinsert the bolt, you just set the lugs flat on the lug raceways and push it forward, and you'll hear it snap, and that's the bolt lock flipping up and retaining the bolt. So now it's held in there. To close your internal box magazine, it's very simple. You put your index finger on the bottom of the floor plate, you take your thumb and you go right in the middle of the V here, and you pinch the bottom of the spring together, and then just simply rotate your floor plate up and close it. That's the easiest, quickest way to close it if you have to open or close the magazine very quickly. When you come up in here, just run your thumb and make sure that the floor plate, or I'm sorry, the follower for for the magazine is flat, and it's not bound up or anything, and there you go, you're good to go. We always want to do a function check when we get done doing any maintenance on the rifle. Again, it's clear there's no ammunition in it. I've physically and visually verified that the weapon is clear. We're going to go ahead and close it. Rifle's on safe, which means the safety selector's to the rear. Press the trigger. Doesn't fire. Doesn't fire when I lift the bolt. When I put it on fire, press the trigger, it operates. Safety doesn't operate. What I also recommend is when you do your barrel cleaning, that's a good time to do a full inspection of the rifle. Make sure that the barrel's straight, there's not any cracks in the stock anywhere. When you do a function check, you also want to go ahead and close the rifle, put it on fire, and slam the buttstock against the ground a couple of times and ensure that the trigger mechanism is preventing the rifle from firing on its own without the safety in place. That's a very important maintenance check on the rifle. You don't want to get a slam fire if you're out in the field. So make sure that even when the rifle is set on fire and the bolt is closed and locked down, that the rifle can take an impact without the weapon firing. Now, this was a detail cleaning. This is something, like I said, that I only do every 500 to 600 rounds. A lot of guys are going to ask what you do after your regular range day. Well, I'll take a bore snake as soon as I'm done firing for the day, and I'll run a bore snake through the barrel just once. The only purpose of that is just to knock the chunks of carbon out of the barrel and to leave a relatively smooth surface for the first round to go down the next time. I'll then pull the bolt out. I'll wipe the bolt off, lube the bolt like I've just shown you without removing the firing pin assembly. I don't remove the firing pin assembly every time, only when we do detail cleaning. I'll take the rag, I'll wipe out the magazine, I'll wipe out the interior of the receiver, put it back together, and that'll be about it. Post-firing cleaning takes all of 5 minutes, and then I'm done, put the rifle up. The key thing is we want to make sure it's dry, we want to make sure that we don't have any corrosion on it, and we want to stay on top of that stuff. Other than that, maintaining a bolt-action rifle is extremely easy. Now again, what I've demonstrated to you here today is my way of cleaning. It's a method that I use. It's a method that I've found most effective, minimum amount of work for the maximum amount of gain. If you have a different way of doing it, great. If it works for you, stick with it. I hesitated doing this for a long time because I know I'll get a lot of hate mail about, hey, that's not the right way to do it. Hey, you're destroying a rifle, blah, 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 all this stuff. Really, there is a lot of misinformation out there about how to clean a rifle. I have seen people lose their minds over me doing things like pulling the brush back through the bore instead of just running it in the direction of the rounds. Really, in the great scheme of things, it doesn't make a big difference. If you're being careful and if you're cleaning with the appropriate tools, you're going to do minimum amount of damage to the weapon. If you decide you want to be one of the guys that cleans after every range trip, maybe you only get to the range once every couple of months, it's not wrong to clean your rifle after every range trip. If you're using the correct tools and you're not scrubbing the rifling out of the bore, then you're not really going to hurt the rifle. I don't do it because it's a waste of time and it's a minimal amount of gain versus what I'm doing now. So this is how I clean my precision rifles. We'll get to semi-automatic rifles here in a later installment. If you've got any questions on what we've done here, go ahead and post them in the comments section below. I'm going to leave a list of recommended cleaning supplies and recommended chemicals in the comments section, or I'm sorry, in the description section. That doesn't mean that's what you got to use. It doesn't mean that if you found something else that works that you can't use that as well. We're going to give M-Pro 7 a try and see how well that works here shortly, and we'll report back to you on that. Other than that, keep your questions coming. Next week we'll probably return back to the regular format and answer some regular questions, but I felt it necessary to do this just because of the incredible amount of questions that I've got on how to clean a rifle. So hopefully this gives you an idea of how to go about it and what to look for and what not to look for. And again, just because you're getting a little bit of gray on one of those patches coming out of the bore doesn't mean you got to keep scrubbing away. Be smart about it. And in the end, we're really worried about what happens on target. We don't worry about how we feel about things. We don't worry about how the rifle looks. We worry about the bullets hitting the X-ring. So if you got questions, please leave them below. And as always, thank you for watching. If you're not a subscriber, please subscribe. If you like the video, please click the thumbs up button below. If you dislike the video, please post a comment and tell us why. Thank you for watching, and until next week, have fun. Thank you for watching, and until next week, get off the internet. Go shoot.